My name is Tori Afton. I'm 43 years old. This past Thanksgiving, I brought a guest to my parents' dinner. A man my family spent 38 years trying to erase. When he stood up and said his name, my mother dropped her wine glass. Red wine bled across the white tablecloth while 20 relatives sat frozen. My dad leaned toward me and whispered 4 words that confirmed every suspicion I'd carried for 2 years. How did you find him? Not who is this man? Not what's going on. He said how. 'Cause he already knew who. What I discovered about my family didn't just explain 30 years of sitting at the children's table while my sister Cheryl received toasts and gifts at the head of the main one. It explained why I was always the outsider. Why nothing I did was ever enough. Why my mother flinched every time someone said I didn't look like anyone in the family. Before I tell you everything, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love knowing who's here with me. Now, let me take you back to last October, to the night I opened an envelope that changed everything I thought I knew about myself. But first, you need the picture of what Thanksgiving looked like in the Afton house, because it had looked the same way for 30 years. Every November, I drove 2 hours from Columbus to my parents' colonial in the suburbs. I arrived early. I always arrived early. Diane, my mother, had a list waiting. Carry the folding tables from the garage. Polish the silver. Arrange the centerpiece. Wipe down every chair at the main dining table. 14 chairs. Padded seats. Then she'd point toward the kitchen. You're in there, Tori. Same as always. Children's table was a plastic folding table wedged between the refrigerator and the back door. I sat with my nieces and nephews, kids between 6 and 12, while the adults ate in the dining room, 10 feet away. Last Thanksgiving, I carried the turkey platter to the main table and set it in front of Frank. He didn't look up. Cheryl was already seated at his right, my mother at his left. Cheryl's chair had a cushion. Nobody else's did. I went back to the kitchen, sat down between my 7-year-old nephew and a stack of paper napkins. Through the doorway, I heard Frank stand the clink of a glass. I want to make a toast to Cheryl, my one true pride. Applause. Laughter. Someone said, "Here, here." I cut a piece of turkey for my nephew and pretended I couldn't hear. After dinner, while I washed dishes, I counted the chairs at the main table one more time. 14 seats. 13 people had eaten there. One chair had stayed empty the entire meal. Nobody offered it to me. Nobody even noticed. I drove home to Columbus that night and sat in my car for 20 minutes before I could make myself walk inside. The toast wasn't the worst part. Frank had been making toast to Cheryl for years. Her promotions, her new house, her daughter's first steps. I'd memorized the rhythm of it, the glass, the pause, the warmth in his voice that I'd never once heard aimed at me. The worst part came later. After the toast, Frank stayed standing. He gripped the back of his chair and looked around the table at all 18 relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins, Cheryl's husband, Brett. "While we're all here," he said, "I want to make something official. When the time comes, this house goes to Cheryl. She's my real flesh and blood. Everything I built is for her." The dining room went quiet. Not shocked quiet. Comfortable quiet. Kind where everyone examines their cranberry sauce. I was standing in the kitchen doorway holding a sponge. Nobody looked at me. Not Frank, not my mother, not Cheryl, who smiled softly and squeezed Frank's hand. My nephew tugged my sleeve. "Aunt Tori, why don't you sit out there?" I looked down at him. "I like it better in here, buddy." I didn't. I had never liked it in here, but that was the story I told to him, to myself, to anyone who asked. Tori prefers the kitchen. Tori is not a social person. Tori chose this. That night, alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop hearing 2 words, real flesh and blood. People say that kind of thing as a figure of speech. Fathers say it about their favorite children without meaning it literally. But Frank didn't say it casually. He said it like a man drawing a property line, like he was stating a legal fact. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I almost believed that. Almost. 3 weeks after that Thanksgiving, I was sitting in a paper gown at my doctor's office in Columbus. Routine blood work had come back flagged. Elevated markers that could point toward a hereditary heart condition. Dr. Pham clicked through my file. Do you have any family history of cardiac issues? Parents, grandparents? I called my mother that evening. Mom, does anyone on Dad's side have heart problems? The doctor's asking about hereditary risks. Silence. Not a thinking silence. A holding your breath silence. Our family doesn't have health problems. Tora, you're fine. Don't worry about it. Mom, the doctor needs actual. I said don't worry about it. Click. I sat on my couch staring at my phone. My mother had hung up on me over a medical question. The next morning at work, I told Margot about it. Margot Selby, my closest colleague, 45, sharp, no patience for nonsense. She'd been estranged from her own family for 6 years and didn't flinch at complicated. Take a DNA test, she said, pouring her coffee. Ancestry, DNA, 23andMe, whatever. They flag hereditary health markers and you get the family history your mother won't give you. I ordered a kit that afternoon, swabbed my cheek, mailed it back, forgot about it for 2 weeks while I closed out Q4 reports. Then on a Tuesday in late October, I was sitting in the office parking lot eating a sandwich when my phone buzzed. Subject line: Your Ancestry DNA results are ready. I opened the email, clicked through to the dashboard, read the first line, read it again, read it a third time, then I called Margot. Frank isn't my father. The dashboard was clinical. Percentages, pie charts, a list of genetic relatives ranked by closeness. On Frank's side, nothing. No matches, not a single cousin, uncle, or distant connection to the Afton family tree. Instead, at the top of my relative matches are Harlan, probable first-degree relative. I sat in my car until my sandwich went cold. Then I drove back to the office, locked my door, and started searching. Robert Haar. White Pages listed him in Dayton, Ohio, 70 from my apartment. A retired carpenter. No social media, one phone number, one address. A retired carpenter in Dayton named Robert Harland was, according to my DNA, either my father, my brother, or my son. Given his age, 68, there was only one option. Margot stood in my office doorway. You need to talk to your mother before you contact him. She was right, so I called. Mom, who is Robert Haar? 8 seconds of silence. I counted 8 full seconds before Diane Afton spoke. That name has nothing to do with you. Don't ever bring it up again. Mom, my DNA test says those tests are wrong all the time. You're being paranoid. You're imagining problems again, Tori. You always do this. Do what? Create drama where there isn't any. Your father is Frank. End of conversation. She hung up. I set my phone down and stared at the wall behind my desk where I kept my diplomas, my certifications, my 15 years of career I'd built from nothing. My mother had just told me I was imagining things. But you don't react like that. Voice shaking, words rehearsed over a name that has nothing to do with you. Something was buried, and I was going to dig. That night, I lay in bed with the ceiling fan ticking above me and ran the math on silence. If I dropped it, I'd never know who Robert Harland was. I'd spend the rest of my life watching Frank pour his love into Cheryl while I stood in the kitchen wondering what was wrong with me. He'd leave the house to her, real flesh and blood. And I wouldn't even understand why the phrase cut so deep. And there was something else, something I'd swallowed for years without naming it. I was 43. I had built a solid career as a regional financial analyst. I had paid off my student loans alone. When my parents nearly lost their house 4 years ago during a bad stretch after Frank's plumbing business slowed down, I wired them $14,000 over 5 months. My mother never said thank you. That Christmas, she told our relatives, Frank handled everything. I let it go. I let a lot of things go. But Frank's Thanksgiving speech had cracked something open. Real flesh and blood wasn't a figure of speech, it was a verdict, and the rest of the family heard it and stayed silent. If I kept quiet, I wasn't just accepting a seat at the children's table, I was accepting that someone else got to write my story, and that story said I didn't belong. I got out of bed and went to the closet where I kept a box of old photos my mother had given me years ago when she cleared out the attic. Halfway through, beneath a stack of Christmas cards, I found it, a photograph of me at 3 years old sitting on the lap of a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, TNR Easter 86, R. Robert. I drove to Dayton on a Saturday morning in early November, 70 miles of flat Ohio highway, hands at 10 and 2, rehearsing sentences I kept abandoning. The address from the white pages led to a small ranch house on a quiet street, a woodworking shop in the detached garage, the door open. The smell of sawdust reached the driveway. I knocked. The man who opened the door was 68, silver-haired, with hands shaped by decades of working wood, calloused palms, a steady posture. He looked at me for 5 full seconds without speaking. "You look just like your grandmother, Vivian." He didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask why I was there. He recognized me. 43 years later, he recognized me. Robert Harlan invited me into a living room filled with furniture he'd built himself. On a shelf by the window sat a small wooden box, hand-carved walnut about the size of a shoebox. He set it on the table between us and opened the lid. Inside were 15 letters and envelopes addressed to Tori Afton, 15 birthday cards, each handwritten, and beneath them a photograph, an older woman with high cheekbones and my chin holding a newborn baby. "That's your grandmother, Vivian," Robert said. "That's you the day you were born. She held you for 2 hours and wouldn't let go." I picked up the closest envelope, postmarked 1999. The front was addressed in careful block letters to my parents' house, stamped across it in red, "Return to sender." And below that, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere, my mother's cursive. 15 years of letters, 15 years of birthday cards, every single one sent back, every one marked by my mother's hand. Robert sat across from me waiting. His eyes were wet, but his voice stayed steady. "I never stopped trying, Tori." He told me everything that afternoon. He married Diane in 1982 at St. Matthew's Church, 3 blocks from my parents' current house. I was born a year later. When I was 3, Diane began seeing Frank, a plumber who came to fix their kitchen sink and stayed for conversations that went too long. Robert found out when I was 4. The divorce was finalized when I was 5. Diane filed for a restraining order, claiming Robert was unstable. The judge found no evidence and dismissed it after 6 months. But by then, Diane had moved Frank in, changed the locks, and stopped answering Robert's calls. He couldn't afford a better attorney. Small-town courts in the 80s didn't favor fathers, so he moved to Dayton, rebuilt his life, and wrote letters to the only address he had. Everyone came back. He stopped sending them when I turned 20, not because he wanted to, but because he believed I had read them and chosen silence. I left Dayton with the wooden box on my passenger seat and drove straight to my parents' house the following Saturday. Frank was at a job site. I sat across from my mother at her kitchen table and laid everything out: the DNA results, the returned letters, the photograph from Easter 86. Diane's face moved through 4 stages in 90 seconds. Denial, DNA tests are wrong all the time. Deflection, Robert abandoned you, you're defending a man who left. Threat, you bring this to Thanksgiving and you won't have a family to come back to. And finally silence, she blocked my number. I sat in my car outside her house and called Margot. My mother just blocked me for asking about my real father. Margot was quiet for a moment. You gave her a chance to talk privately. She chose silence. What you do next is up to you. 2 hours later, Cheryl texted me. Mom says you're going through a rough patch. You need therapy, not Thanksgiving drama. Don't come unless you're ready to be normal. I read it twice, then I started planning. So there I was, sitting in my car outside my mother's house, blocked from her phone, holding a stack of letters my father had written to me for 15 years that I had never received. My own sister telling me I needed therapy, and I had a choice. Stay quiet, keep my seat at the children's table, keep pretending I didn't know what I now knew, or do the one thing this family never expected from me. If you've ever been the one who carried the weight but never got the credit, I think you already know which one I chose. Stay with me. I met Robert for the second time on a Wednesday evening, same ranch house, same smell of sawdust. He had made coffee this time, set 2 mugs on the kitchen table like he had been waiting. I didn't ease into it. I want you to come to Thanksgiving with me. I want my family to know who you are. Robert set his mug down. Tori, I don't want to cause more pain for you. You're not the one who caused pain. The people who hid you from me for 38 years caused pain. You just existed and they punished both of us for it. He looked at the wooden box sitting on the counter. 43 years of birthday cards written to a daughter who never read one. If I go, he said slowly, I won't start a fight, I won't yell, I won't threaten anyone. If someone asks me a question, I'll tell the truth. That's all I have left to offer. That's all I'm asking. He nodded, then his mouth shifted. Not quite a smile, something older than that. I'll need something decent to wear. I took him to a department store the following Saturday. He tried on a navy sports jacket and stood in front of the mirror like a man seeing a stranger. His hands smoothed the lapels. The last time I wore a jacket was my wedding to your mother. The saleswoman asked if it was a special occasion. Robert looked at me. I'm having Thanksgiving with my daughter, he said. She smiled. That sounds lovely. He didn't explain that it was the first one, that there should have been 43 of them. He just paid, folded the jacket carefully into the bag, and we stepped out into the November cold. I had a plan for how the introduction would go, and I kept it to myself. The week before Thanksgiving, my mother made her move. Margot called it narrative control, Diane called it concern. Aunt Margaret, my mother's younger sister, called me Monday evening. Honey, are you okay? Your mom said you've been going through something. She's worried you might not make it to Thanksgiving. I kept my voice steady. I'm fine, Aunt Margaret. I'll be there. She said you might be struggling emotionally. I'm not struggling. I'll see you Thursday. Margaret paused. All right, sweetheart. You know I'm always here. On Tuesday, Frank called, rare, maybe twice a year, usually to ask for help moving furniture. His voice was flat. If you're planning to cause a scene, don't bother coming. I'm just coming for Thanksgiving, Dad. The word Dad caught in my throat the way it hadn't before. It tasted like something borrowed. Good, he said. Keep it that way. Wednesday evening, Cheryl posted a photo on Instagram arranging fall centerpieces at the dining table. Caption read, grateful for family traditions. Some of us know what family really means. Red heart emoji. I stared at it longer than I should have, then set my phone down and packed a bag for Thursday. A change of clothes, the manila envelope with the DNA results, the photograph from Easter '86, and 3 of Robert's returned letters. That night, Aunt Margaret called again. This time, before she hung up, she said something that landed differently. You know, Tori, sometimes I look at you and think you don't look like anyone in this family. She said it like a casual thought, an old aunt making idle observations. But sitting alone in my apartment with a manila envelope on the kitchen counter, it sounded like the last piece clicking into place. Thanksgiving morning, 11 o'clock. The sky was flat gray, the kind Ohio produces from late October through March. I picked Robert up at 9:30. He stood on the porch in his new navy jacket, holding the wooden box. His shoes polished, hair combed back. He looked like a man going to church and a funeral at the same time. We drove 70 miles mostly in silence. Robert held the box on his lap, hands resting on the lid. Once he turned to look out the window. I drove past their house 6 years ago just to see it. Couldn't make myself stop. I parked 2 blocks from my parents' house. The street was lined with cars, relatives already inside. Through the front windows, I could see warm light, moving shadows of greetings. Are you ready? I asked. Robert looked at the house. 43 years I've been ready. We walked up the driveway, leaves crunching under our shoes. Laughter through the front door, dishes clattering, Nat King Cole playing from the speaker my mother set out every year. I opened the door. Living room full, 20 people scattered across couches and chairs, drinks in hand. Aunt Margaret by the fireplace, Kevin pouring wine, Cheryl's daughter running between legs. Frank at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. My mother near the sideboard, red wine in crystal glass. She looked up, saw me, smiled, the automatic hostess smile, and then her eyes shifted to the man behind me. The smile froze, blood leaving her cheeks. My mother recovered fast. 38 years managing this secret doesn't fade easily. Tori, you made it, her voice pitched slightly higher. And who's this? You brought a friend? This is my guest. I'll introduce him at the table. Frank looked up from the turkey. Eyes narrowed at Robert, then back to the knife. Diane intercepted me before I could take off my coat. Gripped my elbow, steered me into the kitchen. Who did you bring into my house? Her whisper sharp enough to slice bone. You know who he is, Mom. You don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly, she said. And I gave you a chance to talk privately. 3 weeks ago you blocked my number. Jaw tightened, she released my elbow, smoothed her blouse, walked back to the dining room, refilled her wine, hand trembling slightly. I hung my coat, slipped the manila envelope inside pocket. Clothes reachable, not yet. Robert stayed near the door, hands clasped, wooden box tucked under his arm, quiet, present. Aunt Margaret walked past, glanced at him, paused, tilted her head as if a word was on the tip of her tongue. She didn't speak. Not yet. My mother clapped. Everyone, let's sit. Dinner's ready. Tori, you're in the back, same as always. I took a breath, held it, let it go. I'll be sitting at the main table today. The room shifted, a wobble rather than a hush, silence when someone steps outside a memorized script. Aunt Margaret looked at me. Cheryl raised an eyebrow. Brett moved a bread basket unnecessarily. Frank didn't look up. There's no room. I pointed to 2 empty chairs at the far end. Dad, he said nothing. Robert walked to one, pulled it out, sat down, wooden box on floor, napkin across lap, steady, unhurried. Like a man who'd earned this seat 43 years ago, taking it late. I sat beside him, hands damp under the table, pulse high, face still. For the first time in 30 years, I was at the adult table. Cheryl leaned toward me. Did you bring a date, Tori? A small laugh, a few chuckles. I didn't answer. Robert didn't answer. Across the table, Diane sat with wine glass, eyes never leaving Robert, fingers pressed white against the stem. Aunt Margaret settled, looked at Robert, then me, then back. Resemblance registering. Frank stood to say grace, patriarchal, voice deep, certain. Lord, we thank you for this table, for people who matter most, for real family, real blood, real bonds that can't be broken. Real blood. I bowed my head, kept my eyes open. Robert did the same. 2 people separated 38 years, sitting 3 seats apart, listening to a man thank God for blood ties while pretending one of us didn't exist. My mother sat across from Robert, hands wrapped around wine glass, eyes wide, staring at his face with terror and recognition. Amen, Frank said. Amen, echoed the table. He picked up the carving knife. Turkey sliced cleanly, plates moved, dishes passed, green beans, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, sweet potato casserole Cheryl always made, always praised. I ate slowly, waiting. Right moment hadn't come yet. Frank or Diane would create it themselves, they always did. Across the table, Aunt Margaret accepted a roll from Robert, said thank you, studied his hands passing the basket, Carpenter's hands familiar somehow. Cut my turkey, breathing even. It was coming. Halfway through, Frank put down his fork, reached for his glass. I knew this gesture, had seen it every Thanksgiving. He stood. I'd like to make a toast. Table settled, forks paused, eyes on him, on Cheryl. Same warmth he'd given her since she was 6. She just got promoted, she's everything a father could ask for. Cheryl smiled, Brett squeezed her hand. Frank wasn't done. Cheryl, you are the only daughter I need. Only. The word dropped like a stone in a pond. Ripples across every face. Aunt Margaret paused with her glass at her lips. Kevin looked down. Brett tightened his hand. I was 3 seats away, voice level, measured like a quarterly report, not a grenade. Thank you for that toast, Dad. And since everyone is here, I'd like to introduce my guest. Table turned toward me, 20 faces, some curious, some confused. Dan's was ashen. I looked at Robert. He looked at me. I gave him the smallest nod. Go ahead. Robert placed his napkin on the table, pushed back his chair, and stood slowly. The way a man stands when he's been sitting in the wrong waiting room for 38 years and his name has finally been called. The room went silent. I could hear Nat King Cole's song end and the next one begin. His hands were steady. His voice carried the weight of 43 years rehearsed in a head that never got to speak aloud. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Heron. He paused, looking around the table. 43 years ago, I married Diane at St. Matthew's Church, 3 blocks from here. And Tori is my daughter. The wine glass hit the tablecloth before anyone could react. My mother's hand opened like a broken hinge. Red wine bloomed across the white linen. Frank turned to me, not Robert, but to me, face the color of old paper, whispering 4 words. How did you find him? Not, this is a lie. Not, who is this person? Just, how did you find him? Table stopped breathing. Aunt Margaret pressed her hand to her mouth. Robert. Oh my God. Robert Heron. She looked from him to Diane, to me, back again. I was at your wedding. I was 16. I remember you. Cheryl's fork clattered onto her plate. What is happening? What is she talking about? Brett put his arm around her. Kevin set down his glass, leaning back like someone re-watching a scene they suddenly understand. Nobody spoke for 8 seconds. I know because I counted, like I counted my mother's silence on the phone the first time I said Robert's name. The wine stains spread slowly. Frank gripped the edge of the table and said nothing. My mother stood. Tears came immediately. Practiced, real, maybe both. Tori, what have you done? You brought this man here to ruin Thanksgiving for everyone. She turned to the table, hands open, asking for help from a congregation. Robert left when Tori was small. He didn't want her. He didn't want either of us. Frank is the one who raised her. Frank is her father. Robert stayed standing. Voice quiet, absolute, stating facts. Diane, I wrote to Tori every year. 15 years. Every letter came back. Return to sender. Your handwriting. Table turned to Diane. She shook her head. That's not true. I reached for my coat from the hall rack, pulling out 3 envelopes, originals, postmarked, stamped in red. I laid them on the table between the gravy boat and sweet potatoes. Return to sender. Cursive handwriting. Diane. Aunt Margaret reached across, picked up the nearest envelope, held it close, then looked at Diane. This is your handwriting, Diane. I've been reading your Christmas cards for 40 years. This is yours. Diane stared. You don't understand the situation. You don't know what, Robert cut in. I never left my daughter. I was removed from her life. There's a difference. Cheryl pressed her hand flat on the table, stabilizing herself. 3 younger cousins frozen mid-bite. My mother scanned the table for an ally. For the first time in 38 years, nobody looked at her the way she needed. Cheryl spoke first, voice distant. Wait, if Tori isn't Dad's daughter, why did I grow up hearing she was difficult, the one who couldn't appreciate family? Frank pointed his fork. Don't listen to this. This is your sister's drama. Cheryl turned to him. Dad, you said real flesh and blood last Thanksgiving. You said it about me. Were you being literal? Frank's jaw worked, no sound. Cheryl turned to Diane. Mom, you filed a restraining order against her real father. You don't understand. Then help me understand, because from where I'm sitting it looks like Tori spent 30 years eating in the kitchen because she wasn't his biological child, and nobody told me. Brett squeezed her arm. She pulled it free. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her eyes wet, mascara smudging. She looked at me. Did you know? I found out 6 weeks ago. Tried to tell Mom. She blocked my phone. Cheryl closed her eyes, palms pressed to the table like a stabilizer on a rocking boat. When she opened them, she focused somewhere between the cranberry sauce and the year she turned 6, the year she became the only child Frank wanted to claim. Kevin reached for the water pitcher. Margaret hadn't let go of the envelope. Brett stared at the tablecloth, wine stains slowly spreading. I need to pause here. Watching Cheryl's face crack, realizing the foundation of her understanding of this family had been a lie, was not something I had planned. I didn't bring Robert to hurt Cheryl. I brought him because I deserved to sit next to my own father at least once in my life. I opened the manila envelope fully, spreading its contents on the table. Not like a lawyer presenting evidence, but a daughter laying out the pieces of a life someone dismantled. DNA results, 0 genetic connection to the Afton family, a first-degree match to Robert Heron. The photograph of me at 3, sitting on Robert's lap, back labeled TNR, Easter 86. 3 original returned letters, Diane's cursive. Robert opened his wooden box, set it in the center of the table next to the ruined tablecloth. 15 birthday cards, each addressed to me, undelivered. The bottom, a photograph. An older woman with sharp cheekbones, my jawline, holding a newborn in a hospital blanket. That's your grandmother, Vivian, Robert said, loud enough for the table. Holding you the day you were born. Aunt Margaret picked up the photograph, looked at it, then at me. Free hand to her mouth. Dear Lord, she looks just like you, Tori. The photo passed from cousin to cousin, uncle to aunt. Every person glanced from the woman to me and back. Diane sat perfectly still, wine glass empty, broken glass swept aside by Kevin with a dish towel. Her face locked in a look I had never seen, not anger, not fear, resignation. The look of someone who has been running for so long they've forgotten how to stop. Frank stared at the returned letters. Hadn't touched one. Hadn't denied anything. Silence louder than any confession. Then he broke. Shoved his chair back so fast water glasses rattled. Get out of my house. He pointed at Robert. Robert stayed. Hands on the table, voice level. I came because my daughter invited me. I'll leave when she's ready. Frank swung toward me, vein on his temple pulsing. I raised you. I put food on your plate. Kept a roof over your head. I am your father. I looked at him. 30 years of children's tables, dismissed birthdays, and real flesh and blood. I spoke like I do in quarterly reviews, clear, specific, documented. You raised me, but you sat me in the kitchen for 30 years. You told 18 people last Thanksgiving that Cheryl was your only daughter. You used the phrase real flesh and blood to cut me out of the will in front of everyone here. You knew the truth about me since the day you married Mom, and you used it to punish me every single day for something I had no part in. Frank's mouth opened. You don't know what you've done to this family. No. You don't get to finish that sentence. I didn't cause this. I was born. That's all I did. Cousin Kevin stood and placed a hand on Frank's shoulder. Sit down, Uncle Frank, please. Frank looked at Kevin's hand like it was foreign, then around the table, Margaret, the cousins, Cheryl. Nobody was looking at him the way they used to. Patriarch routine requires an audience that believes in it. He sat down, pushed his plate away, and didn't speak for the rest of the meal. Robert folded his hands. I didn't come here to fight. I came because my daughter asked me to. My mother made one last attempt. Robert is unstable, she said, voice cracking. That's why I filed the restraining order. He was dangerous. I was protecting Tori. Robert turned to her, eyes patient, the patience that comes from carrying something for decades you cannot set down. The restraining order was dismissed, Diane. The judge found no evidence. You withdrew it after 6 months, but by then you'd already moved Frank in and changed the locks. I lost every route back to my daughter. Diane opened her mouth, closed it. Aunt Margaret leaned forward. Diane, why? Why did you hide this? My mother's hands dropped to her lap. Tears came differently this time. Slow, quiet, kind that happen when the walls finally come down. I was scared, she whispered. I was terrified Frank would leave me if Robert came back. I was afraid of what the town would say, that I had a marriage before, that I cheated while still married, that everything they thought about our family was wrong. She looked at Frank. I told you Robert left. I told you he didn't want her. Frank stared at the table. I lied, Diane whispered. 2 words. 38 years of construction, the careful mythology, the golden child, the scapegoat, the children's table. 2 words, I lied. The room didn't erupt. Nobody yelled. Younger cousins were ushered to the living room. Kevin refilled water glasses like a man unsure what else to do with his hands. Diane sat at the table she'd controlled for 3 decades, stripped of the only story she knew how to tell. Aunt Margaret was shaking. 38 years, Diane, she said, pressing her knuckles into the table. 38 years, I asked why you treated Tori differently. You said I was imagining things. You said Tori was difficult. You said she isolated herself. I was right. I was right the entire time. Kevin spoke across the table. I remember Robert. He came to your wedding, Aunt Diane. He made a toast. He was kind. Kevin looked at Robert. I was maybe 12, but I remember. Robert nodded. I remember you too, Kevin. You spilled punch on your shirt. Kevin almost smiled. Almost. Cheryl hadn't spoken since her outburst. She sat between Brett and her untouched plate, staring at her hands. Brett held her shoulder. Frank pushed his plate forward, sat down his napkin, then stood. I need air. He walked to the back hallway. The screen door opened and closed. Through the window, I saw him standing on the back porch, hands on the railing, staring at the yard where he built a swing set for Cheryl 20 years ago. He never built me anything. The dining room was still. Table full of food going cold. 20 relatives recalibrating everything they believed about this family. I stayed in my seat. Robert stayed in his. For the first time in 30 years, I was sitting at the main table beside my father, and nobody asked me to move to the kitchen. No applause. No dramatic music. Just the slow human process of a family realizing the story they'd been told, that Tori was difficult, that Frank was generous, that Diane held everything together, was a work of fiction. Diane reached for her wine glass. Empty. She set it down again carefully and didn't look up. I stood, not quickly, not dramatically, the way you stand when you've made a decision and it is already done. I didn't come here to ruin Thanksgiving. The table looked at me, some with sympathy, some with shock still settling. Margaret, tears running freely. Tori, I am so proud of you. 43 years old, standing in the dining room I'd been banned from for 3 decades, I heard those words for the first time. I let them land. Then I looked at Robert. Let's go. Robert picked up his wooden box. We walked through the living room, past family photos on the mantel. Not a single one included him. Past the front closet where I grabbed my coat and the now empty manila envelope. Aunt Margaret caught me at the door. She wrapped her arms around me tight, the way she used to when I was small and nobody else was watching. Then she turned to Robert, shaking his hand with both of hers. You should never have been erased from this family. Robert nodded. Thank you, Margaret. Kevin raised a hand from across the room, a quiet salute. Cheryl was still at the table. I didn't expect her to move, but as I passed the dining room archway, her hand reached out, caught mine. No words. Just 3 seconds, a squeeze, then let go. I didn't look back. Sighed. The November air hit my face, sharp, clean, the opposite of what we'd just walked through. Leaves scraped across the porch. The sky already dimming. That early Thanksgiving dusk when every house glows warm and you can smell everyone's dinner at once. Robert walked beside me, steady, unhurried. A man who'd waited 43 years to walk out of somewhere with his daughter. "You okay?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." We reached my car. I unlocked the doors. Robert set the wooden box in the back seat like something precious. My phone buzzed, a text from a number I didn't recognize. I opened it. "This is Brett. Cheryl wants to meet with you next week. Just the two of you." I showed the screen to Robert. He read it, nodded once, buckled his seatbelt. I drove toward Dayton. The highway nearly empty. Most people still at their tables, eating pie, watching football, pretending everything was fine. Robert didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. Hands on his knees, watching the flat Ohio farmland pass in fading light. When he finally moved, he reached into the back seat for the wooden box. He opened it carefully and pulled out a birthday card from near the bottom. The envelope was yellowed, fragile. He held it gently, the way you hold something that's been waiting to be read for decades. "This is the one I wrote for your 5th birthday," he said. He opened it inside, block letters steadier than his current handwriting, a younger man's hand spilling love across the page. "Happy 5th birthday, Tori. Daddy misses you every single day. I hope one day you'll read this. I'm not going anywhere. Love, Dad." I pulled over, put the car in park, pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. I cried. Not the polite, manageable kind, but the kind that comes from a place so deep you didn't know existed until the lid came off. 43 years. 43 birthday cards written. None received. Robert's hand rested on my shoulder, heavy, warm, rough. "You don't have to be strong every moment. Not with me." I sat up, wiped my face, and looked at him. The man with my grandmother's cheekbones, sawdust under his nails, and 43 years of patience that I was only just beginning to understand. I was 43, and that was the first time my dad had ever told me he loved me. We sat in the car, watching the Thanksgiving sunset stretch across the Ohio highway. This time, the silence didn't hurt. The fallout came in waves. "Monday morning," Aunt Margaret called. I spoke to Kevin and a few others. Most were in shock, but they believed me. Kevin remembered Robert as a good man. 2 of Frank's nephews blocked me on Facebook within 48 hours. One posted a vague status about people who destroy families for attention. I didn't respond. Frank went silent, no calls, no texts. The man who spent 30 years as patriarch couldn't bring himself to pick up the phone and own what he'd done. Diane found a workaround for the number she'd blocked. She sent a 3-paragraph email from Cheryl's address. "You destroyed everything. You don't know what I sacrificed. I did what I did to protect you. Everything I built was for this family. Same narrative, same framing. Diane as hero, Tori as wrecking ball, Robert as villain." But now the audience had seen the letters, watched the wine glass shatter, observed the handwriting, witnessed the truth. The word traveled the way it does in small-town Ohio, through casserole dishes and parking lot conversations. Pastor Williams called Diane, asking if she'd meet privately. She said she'd think about it. The Afton house, the Thanksgiving tablecloth went into the trash. The wine stain wouldn't come out. Aunt Margaret told me Diane had tried bleach, then vinegar, then given up. Some stains don't come out. Some aren't meant to. Christmas arrived 5 weeks later. For the first time in 20 years, Aunt Margaret hosted. She didn't ask Diane for help. Didn't consult Frank on seating. When Diane called, Margaret said simply, "Dinner's at 4. You're welcome to come." Small shift, but small shifts crack foundations. Frank didn't come. Stayed home alone or with Diane. Nobody was sure. Kevin and his wife went to Margaret's. 2 of Frank's nephews did the same. The patriarch's table shrank. Cheryl came with Brett and their daughter. Afterward, she drove to Dayton and spent an hour at Robert's house. She brought a pie. Robert brewed coffee. I watched my sister sit in my father's living room, taking in the furniture he'd built with his own hands, plain, careful, solid work. "This is a nice place, Mr. Harland," she said. "Call me Robert," he replied. She nodded. Neither of them were ready for more than that, but they were in the same room, which was more than anyone could have predicted a month ago. Diane sent another email the week after Christmas. Short. "I know you need time. I understand if you're angry. I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I just made choices I can't undo." I read it once, then closed it. I wasn't ready to answer. I wasn't sure when I would. But I noticed something new. She didn't mention Frank. Didn't defend the lie. Didn't call me difficult. Crack. A small one. Christmas at Roberts was nothing like Thanksgiving at the Aftons. It was quiet. It was real. And it was ours. If you want, I can continue this and craft the next chapter where Tori begins building a true relationship with her dad and Cheryl, showing small moments of healing and closure over the following year. Could be just as cinematic and emotionally grounded as your current narrative. Do you want me to do that? 6 people sat at a table built for 4. Robert had pulled a workbench from his shop, sanded it down, covered it with a cloth, and pushed it against his kitchen table so everyone fit. Margot brought wine. Cheryl brought a casserole. Brett carved the turkey, a small one, 10 pounds, golden brown. There was no head of the table, no reserved seating, no cushion on anyone's chair. Nobody got a toast. Nobody got sent to the kitchen. Robert had cooked the stuffing using his mother's recipe, sage and cornbread, written in Vivian's handwriting on a yellowed, oil-stained index card taped inside a cabinet. He'd made it every Thanksgiving for 40 years alone. "Grandma Vivian's stuffing," Cheryl said, tasting it. She caught herself on the word grandma and looked at Robert. He smiled. "She'd want you to call her that." After dinner, I helped Robert wash the dishes. He washed. I dried. The window above the sink looked out at his backyard, a small workshop, a bare dogwood tree, a square of frozen grass. "You know what I missed most?" Robert asked, handing me a plate. "This." Standing next to someone in the kitchen because I want to, not because someone told me to. I dried the plate, set it in the cabinet. This is the first time in my life I've eaten a meal without feeling like I was asking permission to be here. Robert turned off the water, dried his hands on the dish towel. "You never need permission in this house." "Not ever." I nodded. For the first time in 43 years, I believed it. After the dishes were done and Cheryl and Brett had left, Robert asked me to sit. He reached into the cabinet above the refrigerator, the one I couldn't reach without a step stool, and pulled out a plain white envelope with my name in his block letters. "I wrote you one every year," he said. Even after I stopped mailing them, I kept writing. 43 total. This is the most recent one. He slid it across the table. My 43rd birthday card. I opened it. Hand-folded, precise, clean. "Happy 43rd birthday, Tori. This year, for the first time, I get to say it to your face. I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. Love, Dad." I read it twice. Set it on the table. Pressed both hands flat on the surface the way Cheryl had at Thanksgiving, holding steady, holding on. Margot, sitting on the couch with her wine, wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I stood and hugged Robert. He smelled like sawdust, dish soap, and cedar shavings caught in his sleeves. "Thank you," I said, "for not giving up." His arms tightened. Vivian wouldn't have let me go. We stood in his small kitchen, holding on. Margot reached for the tissue box on the counter and didn't try to pretend she wasn't crying. I'm not telling you this story to teach a lesson. Lessons belong in classrooms. This belongs at a kitchen table between 2 people being honest. But I spent 43 years learning something I want to share, not as advice, just as truth. I spent 3 decades trying to earn a place at a table that was rigged against me. I showed up. I cooked. I cleaned. I sent money when they needed it and bit my tongue when they forgot to say thank you. I believed that if I tried hard enough, loved hard enough, proved enough, eventually I'd be enough. I wasn't working toward acceptance. I was working against a secret I didn't know existed. The game was fixed before I sat down. No amount of effort could change it because the outcome wasn't about effort, it was about a lie my parents told and a man they erased. Setting a boundary isn't punishment. It's the first time you decide your own respect matters as much as everyone else's comfort. I don't hate my mother. I don't hate Frank. I am not spending my energy hating people who are already carrying the weight of their choices. But I also won't pretend anymore. I won't sit where they tell me to sit. I won't be the version of me they invented to keep their secrets safe. If you're sitting at your own children's table, literal or not, if you're the one who does the most and gets noticed the least, the one who keeps showing up and keeps getting overlooked, hear me, you have the right to pull up a chair. You have the right to know who you are. And if the table won't make room for you, you have every right to build your own. 2 weeks after Christmas, a Tuesday morning in January, my apartment in Columbus. Coffee on the counter, snow falling outside for the first time this winter. My phone rang. Not a text, a call. The screen said, "Mom." I stared. She hadn't called since Thanksgiving. A voicemail played. "Tori, it's Mom. I don't know how to start this. I've been trying to figure out what to say for 6 weeks and I still don't know, but I want to talk. If you're willing, whenever you're ready. I'm not calling to defend myself. I know what I did." Click. I listened 3 times. Set the phone down. Walked to my bedroom. On my nightstand sat Robert's wooden box. I pulled out the card from my 5th birthday, the first one he ever wrote. "Daddy misses you every single day." I held it. Put it back. Closed the lid. Would I call her back? I didn't know. But for the first time in 43 years, the decision was mine. Not Dan's. Not Frank's. Mine. For 43 years, my mother wrote my story. This morning, for the first time, the pen is in my hand. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it hit close to home, know you're not alone. Your story matters just as much as mine. Now I have a question for you. If you were me and your mother left that voicemail, would you call her back or wait until she shows up at your door? Type call or wait in the comments. I want to hear what you would do. And if you want more stories about reclaiming your truth, setting boundaries, and finding the family that was stolen from you, check the description below. I've got a few more that you'll want to hear. See you in the next one.